Hello, everyone, and welcome to Level Design Experimentation 3/8/2019. In this experimentation recording, I'm going to go through the process of creating a basic conveyor belt that is going to work in the Scraps project that we are currently using for the Level Design course. For this conveyor belt, I've got a couple reference images that I pulled up of things that I would like to see done. I want to move objects in a direction across the conveyor belt, but also I want to be able to reverse that direction and move it back to the opposite side. When it reaches the end, I would like to put some sort of uh, a location for objects to go, and if they go into it, I'm going to warp them to the opposite side. So if there is two boxes on the sides of the conveyor belt, they'll go into one and then come out the other, and the reason for it is so that we're not wasting objects. We shouldn't be destroying them and then recreating them. Um, the belt needs to be able to change direction. So if this one down here has it go, in a zigzag pattern, I want to be able to have them go down the belt and then kind of turn and keep moving. So let's go ahead and start that. I'm going to move some of these things to my other screen, and then we're going to go to Unity and get this going. Unity's up right now over here, and I've got the toy box scene loaded and ready to go. This is where any of your construction of mechanics and testing and things should hang out, because we've got the character here, all the game systems and whatnot, and then there's nothing else really in the way for us to mess with or interact with, such as like terrains and that kind of stuff. So in here, I've already made a folder that I'm going to use for this experimentation. So anything that we create is going to go into that folder. So first things first, we need to come up with how this is going to work. So I'm going to make a basic belt of sort. So let's go new shape on Pro Builder. And I'm going to select a cube, go ahead and hit build it, and then close that shape window. And then my cube's over here. So I'm going to hold V, which snaps corners. I'm going to snap the corner here to something in this scene so I can see it. And then let's move it over. Now the player's right here, so I can scale things to the player with that, but sometimes the player is not readily available for you. We do have a player size tool that is in the tools folder. So if I go to the tools folder and pull up player size and place it, now I have a character that I can move around without affecting how the game works. That way, if I wanted the player to stand on top of a conveyor belt, I could use this as my check for that scale and be like, is this correct? Yeah, that's probably pretty good. Let's make this a little longer. So I'm going to select the face and then hold Control to drag this and move it across the grid. And let's just go across this space here on the toy box, and that'll be the starting position for that. Select object mode, and now my pivot point is here. I have it set to pivot. If I set center, you'll see it jumps to the middle, but that's not actually the pivot point of this object. So if I have pivot selected and then I go to like this face, for example, and then do set pivot, okay, which is we're on face, so these red ones are face. Set pivot will set it to this corner, and that way if I wanted to rotate it or something, it would rotate from this corner. All right, so we've got a box that'll be the stand-in for our plate. I'm going to go ahead and move this character out of the way, put it over here, and then on here we need a way to know if something is on the top of this volume. The way that I'm going to do that is by creating a trigger volume that if something's staying within it, it can then move in the direction of this conveyor belt. So this, we already have a cube started that's the same length as what we need. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this cube, hold Control and move it up. And then this is going to become a trigger. However, I don't want objects that are like hovering above the conveyor belt to move. I just want things that are standing on it to move. So I'm going to select the top here and move this down to just big enough for a foot to stand in the trigger. And then let's go ahead and change this to, I'm going to disable the mesh renderer. Now we see the box instead. And then for the collider, instead of using a mesh collider, I'm going to switch this to a box collider. So I'm going to remove the mesh collider, add box collider, and immediately it already scales to the size of the object because ProBuilder knows it's a cube. I'm going to set it as a trigger, and that's so we can stand in it. And then anything that is a trigger, we want to make sure that we're ignoring raycast on it. Otherwise, the gravinal is going to kind of bump into it, and the player won't be able to solve collision by jumping on it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Layer, change it to Ignore Raycast, and now I should be able to jump on it without any issues. But jumping on it is not going to really give me what I'm looking for. It's about how it functions. So I'm going to go ahead and let's actually set this. I guess that pivot point's fine. I'm going to go ahead and create the basis of the script, and then we're going to see if it functions, and then we can keep moving with it. Let's change cube to trigger volume, and then because this is all one conveyor belt system, I'm going to make an empty game object that's going to hold everything. So this empty, let's name this conveyor belt. And then I'm going to give it an icon. You can actually go to this square right here and switch this to a color or a symbol or something. I'm just going to show the, let's do yellow or something so it pops out. And then if we move this over, I'm going to hold V to bring it over here and snap it. Snap it to here. Now we see it says conveyor belt. And so the conveyor belt object, I can then put, let's center it with this cube. So this cube, its current position is here. I'm going to put, actually, no, conveyor belt's fine right there. I'm going to leave that one just here in the corner. I will put this cube under conveyor belt, and I'm going to put the trigger volume under conveyor belt. And that's so we have this one object that I can just move wherever I want it to go. Okay, so on the trigger volume, which is going to handle all of our movement, I want it to push things in a direction. So let's go ahead and get that started by hitting add component, and then we're going to type a script. Whenever you add a script or create a script, you should use your initials first because you're going to join a team. And if you join a team and everyone has the same named scripts, you're going to have a lot of issues with like duplicate namespaces and things like that. And it's just errors you don't need to deal with. So to immediately be on the good side and not cause issues like that, let's put some sort of a naming scheme together. I'm going to do my initials, DAM, and then underscore, and then whatever we want to call it. So I'm going to call this conveyor belt, and then hit new script and create an add. Now it's down here, it immediately compiles, and then when it's all done and compiled, we're going to jump into MonoDevelop. Alrighty. Or not MonoDevelop, I apologize, Visual Studio. Anywho, so we've got this open. I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bigger. So we've got the two default methods ready to go, start and update. Start is called right when the game starts. So like as soon as you hit play, that's when start happens. And then update is called once per frame. It's something that every time the screen draws, we can make something change or move or happen or whatever. That's all well and good. But the thing that we need to do is handle trigger volumes. So if you ever are confused as to what Unity offers, you can always pull up a web browser and go to, give me one second, Unity. If we go to Unity's website, so unity.com, and then we can go to learn, and if we go to learn, we can go to documentation, and in documentation, we're in the user manual, let's go to the scripting API. And then in the scripting API, we want to handle triggers. So we're going to say trigger. If you search trigger, then you'll get all the things that triggers can do. The one thing that we're looking for is collider trigger, I believe, because we're setting the collider as the trigger. So if you do collider trigger, there you go. Then we got is trigger, we've got on trigger, enter, exit, stay. So enter is the first frame that something enters the trigger. Exit is when something exits, but stay is called almost every frames for every collider that is touching this. So almost every frame is not as good as update, but for a simple conveyor belt, this is all I need to use. So if I pop into here, we already have a sample script. It says on trigger stay, collider other, and then it checks if it's like got a rigid body, and then this adds force in the up direction, which means that if it's within a trigger, it's going to slowly rise into the air until it's out of the trigger, and then it'll fall. So that's, at least we know that this is how we can set it up. So we're going to go take what this does and use it to propel things right or left, or rather in a direction that the conveyor belt's going. So I'm going to go to Visual Studio, and then we're going to just get rid of these because I don't really need them right now. Those still exist in mono behavior. It's just I'm keeping my script clean. So we're going to say void on trigger stay. On trigger stay. When you hit enter, it's just going to populate this. Void by itself is private. If you write private in front of it, it's the same thing as just writing it without private. I always have people confused about that, so I just want to let you guys know. The only time that it's not private is if you say public, which makes it available for other people or other scripts to call it from. If you like get component and call that or something like that. So let's just go ahead and private void on trigger stay. So void on trigger stay means that something is hanging out in our trigger volume. Now we don't know what is hanging out unless we verify it with some sort of script. So what I want to know is that if it has a rigid body, that it's something that is physically able to move in the scene. So I'm going to say if, and I'm going to ask other being the collider that has entered this or is staying in this trigger volume. I'm going to see if other has a rigid body component. So other dot get component, and the component I'm looking for, rigid body. And then if this has a rigid body, so you can leave it like this, which is just checking to see if it returns a value, or you can say does not equal null, meaning that if it returns a value and it's not null, then great. Both of those would work. Then we have a rigid body. So this would be get component check for a rigid body. And then we have one. So here we have one. And if we have one, let's make it move in a direction. So if we look at Unity real quick, this scene has, if you can see the gizmo in the top corner, blue is Z, Z is forward. So this is the forward direction of this conveyor belt. And so if we use that to our advantage, if we move objects to the forward direction of this trigger volume, then it'll go that direction. And then all we have to do is rotate it to go in an opposite direction. So in the script, I'm going to say, let's move it forward. Or let's move it. Yeah, it's fine. So let's go ahead and, how do I want to do this? We can move it with the transform, or we can move it with force. I think I'm going to move it with the transform instead. So we already know that it has a rigid body, so it's something that can fall on this and move around and stuff. The character's got a rigid body as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and say other.transform dot position, I believe, equals transform dot move. No, that's not it. Let's find out. I think it was position equals vector3 dot move. There it is. So vector3 move towards, it says moves a point current in a straight line toward a target point. So we have our current position, and then the target position and where we're moving. We can use move towards like that to move it towards a target. Maybe that's not what I wanted. I think I just want to do transform dot we can do translate instead, I think, maybe. Translate is just going to move the transform in a direction of it. So vector 3 translation, now we're getting the direction I want to go. So I would like to translate in the forward direction of this object. So I'm going to say, you can say just transform, or like transform would be getting the transform from the conveyor belt. If that's confusing to you, you can say this dot transform, and then you do dot forward. So that'll be in the forward direction. And then we need some sort of speed to move this on. So I'm going to go ahead and store a number that we can then tweak. So up here at the top, we'll say public float speed, and let's just set it equal to 2 for right now, so we can see a difference. So move it forward here, and we're going to say times speed, and then we're going to do it times time dot delta time. So we're going to move it over delta time. Now, earlier, I had said from the document, it said on trigger stay doesn't happen as often as update does, and this would be better to do in update. However, if we did it in update, we would have to save who was actually standing on this. And to avoid doing that, for right now, I'm just going to do it in here. It'll give us pretty much what I'm looking for. So saving this out, let's just go give it a shot. So trigger volume, direction, it's going to compile. And then we should have the variable for speed up here when it's done. So there you go, speed. Now we can change it if we wanted to. But let's go ahead and just hit play and take a peek at this. All right, so conveyor belt, and if I jump on it, then we start moving in this direction. And so if I rotate, it seems to be sliding me off. So this looks like it's moving in my direction, not in the, yeah, we're moving in my forward direction, not in that one. Let's see. This is the conveyor belt's forward direction. I don't know why that, I guess it's the translate the way that that's happening. So let's instead, because that's not giving me the right response, I'm just going to create a position at the end of the conveyor belt that we're going to move towards. So let's do, let's go public transform end position. And so this is going to be another object that we'll just place at the end of the conveyor belt. And then let's just set my other dot transform dot position to equal vector3 dot move towards, and then we'll just take my current position, so this, and then we'll move it towards the target, which is end position, and then end, or it's actually a transform, so I could call it end transform, and then we'll move it to the position of that. So end transform dot position, just so it makes sense. And then the max distance delta, what we put in here is going to be time dot delta time and speed. So let's go speed times time dot delta time. All right, save. And that'll give us something that actually is going to go in the right direction. This is good too, because if you wanted to make the point not forward but maybe up or something, you could use that instead. Let's go game object empty. This one's going to be the end position. I'm going to give it an icon, so let's give it like a yellow icon thing, and then put it under the trigger volume. I'm going to set its position to 0, 0, 0, which is right at the front, and then let's just push it all the way to the end, so over here somewhere. Now we're going to move towards this, so I should go off this conveyor belt, so it should exit the trigger volume and then fall. And let's move it down a little bit, I think. Actually, I'm going to snap this to the corner, and then we'll move it center. This is 1 unit. Let's focus. There we go. Focus is you double click on a thing, or you hit F while you're in here, and it'll focus to it. I want to make sure we're moving towards the center of this, so we're going to go X is 0, Y is negative 0.5, and then Z is 10. We'll just go a little bit off of that, so we move out that way. Trigger volume, I'm going to set end transform to this end position, drag that right into that slot, and then one more time, hit play, and take a peek. Okay, so if I jump on it now we're moving this way. If I turn, we're still moving this way. Now I can run against it. That's more so what we're looking for. It still slowly moves you to the center, and I definitely am not falling off at that point. But slowly moving you to the center, that's something we can, if we keep tweaking it, we could do something with. I'm going to move this off here a bit so you keep moving. Let's, okay, so we're going in one direction. Let's make sure that the this thing can be switched between forward or backwards. So right now speed is going 2. If I switch this to -2, we would actually travel away from the end position. Just going to hop in here real quick. So if I jump in on this side now, we're going to go this way. So now that we know that we can switch that float backwards and forwards, we should create some method of interaction to make that move forwards or backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and put a material on this so it's a little easier to see. The project's got several materials that are required for prototype, blockout, etc. I'm going to go to the material editor. It's a pop-up window that has a bunch of things assigned in mind, but you can also add slots. So if I add one, you can then put another material in here and hit apply. All these buttons here apply stuff. I'm going to go ahead and just see if I can apply it. So let's do the conveyor belt. This bottom part, I'm going to make a prop static, and then I'm going to make another piece up here that's going to be a dynamic belt. So let's go ahead and do static neutral, and notice that it didn't apply anything. So that I've seen a bug recently that I want to make sure everyone's aware of. This face was the last face that I was selecting when I was working, and it only applied here. So if you select face, and then you click out here, and then click on object, and then the object, and then try it again, then it's going to actually switch this to all of it instead. So now we've got static all the way down, and then I'm going to duplicate this cube, and we're going to create kind of like a belt. And it's just going to be something that's embedded in this a little bit that makes it kind of stand out. I'm going to move it in a little, and then we'll grab this side and move in a little, and then down. Okay. And so if we take this whole piece that we just kind of modified and push it into this, then it's going to be more of like the actual belt on the conveyor belt. And then I'm going to change this one, material editor, to dynamic, plop. And now we've got something that signifies that this is an interactive belt that we're going to move things back and forth on. You may have to tweak the edges and stuff to make sure that you're not causing any Z fighting. Like if I grab this side, I can move it out just a hair, and grab this side, move it out just a hair. Notice that it only applied the material that I just used to that one part. So if I wanted to, I could go back and reset this like I did with the other one. Material editor, face, sky, object, select the object, switch it to dynamic, and there we go. I don't want this to be the thing that I'm colliding with. Actually, I guess that wouldn't really matter because of where the trigger volume is. That still would move me. So if I hit play and jump on this, there we go. That looks more like a conveyor belt. So if I jump on this now and go that way, run across this, and eventually we can have this one in the middle here, like scroll UVs to make it look like it's actually moving, to give the player some feedback. But the next piece I wanted to do was just some sort of way to interact with how this thing moves forward and backward. So let's go ahead and make a switch of some sort. So let's make I'm going to make a new shape. We'll hold V and snap this up here real quick. Build it. Close that window. V, snap it over here. I think that's snapping from the center. Let's grab this. There we go. All right. I just want to make some sort of like simple console that the player can step in front of or step next to, and then when they interact with a button, have it switch directions. Because it's it's only going to go forward or backward. I could track to see if the last direction was forward or backward, and then just have it, you know, like kind of bounce between the two. So I'm going to make this be just high enough for the player to step in front of. Let's move this over real quick. If this was a character standing in front of a console, then this height seems pretty good. The hands would come down onto a keyboard or something. You always want to scale things to the player's size. Let's move this down a little bit. I'm going to hold the shift and extrude up to create like the top. I'm going to take edge selection, select this side, move it over to make kind of more like a board, and that should be good. Let's grab this one and just go zoom out a little bit. This one, extrude up, and there we go. Now we got like a console. All right, let's get this back over here. This console, let's set the material. So I'm going to select the face, click out here, click back on the object, material editor, and let's make this dynamic. Actually, I'm going to make this whole thing a different static cool or static neutral. That was what I was trying to do. Just to give it a different color, and then I'm going to just create like some sort of a switch on here. Just to make sure that the one object that you're supposed to interact with kind of stands out. So let's just make a new object. Let's make like a big button, so a cylinder. This cylinder I'm going to snap over to here. Cylinder is obviously too big for a button, but we can change the radius to be a little smaller. And we'll change the height to be smaller. Now we've got more of like the big red button that we can put here. Console's probably too big for one button, but that's fine. This is plenty big for me. So I'm going to go ahead and hit build. Then I'm going to rotate it so it's facing out like it should, so that we can, mash the button forward, down a little bit. There we go. And then this button and this console, let's make sure that this object can be self-contained. So I'm going to make an empty game object. I'm going to move, hold V, snap this to the corner, put this cube underneath it, put this cylinder underneath it. Then this cube, let's call, just console's fine. Cylinder, let's call button. And then this button is going to be the dynamic thing, the thing that we know is the interaction point. So I'm going to go to Material Editor. I'm going to hit Dynamic. It colors the whole thing because I didn't select any edges. And then that should be good for the location that I'm going to walk up to. I could even say console. Let's give this a little icon. So there's console, conveyor belt. Okay. So this is going to need some sort of way for the player to interact with it. So let's go ahead and on the console, I'm going to create a, let's go ahead and hit add DAM, and then this is going to be conveyor console. Conveyor console is going to handle the forward or backward and I guess the overall speed. And my goal is that we're going to talk to multiple conveyor belts at the same time. And then that'll be the wrap up of everything I'm trying to do. Give it a moment to load. Yes. Okay, conveyor console. So conveyor console is going to control the direction of the conveyor belts. So conveyor belt has this speed variable, and we know that we changed the speed from 2 to -2, and it went the opposite direction. So I'm going to have conveyor console control multiple conveyor belts. So let's just start with one for right now. I'm going to say public DAM for the script conveyor belt, and we're going to use the script name as the component we're talking to. I'm going to call this belt, and then we're going to have a private boolean, and we'll use this boolean to control if we're going forward or backward. So is forward, and let's say true. Forward. There you go. Is forward is going to be if we're going forward, and then set it to false, we'll go backward. So in here, and I should probably put the actual speed of the belt in here. So let's go public float speed, and let's set this equal to 2. Conveyor belt, instead of doing the speed here, we'll probably, oh, they should have a speed as well, but we can set the value that way. Okay, so in here, let's go void update. And then in update, which was once per frame while the game's running, we can say if is forward, are we going forward? If this is true, then make sure belts move forward. We have one belt to do right now, so let's go belt, put a period after it. This will give us everything that that object is inheriting. So belt is a conveyor belt, and if conveyor belt has speed on it, then I should be able to say belt.speed and set it equal to our speed, whatever speed's going to be. And so if we set speed beforehand, then it is going to control it for all of them. Let's do speed equals, if we're going forward, let's set it equal to, yeah, 2 is fine. And then, actually, how do I want to do this? I guess that's fine. Or, yes, no, that's good. So speed's going to equal, I'm actually going to get rid of setting it here. We're going to say speed equals speed, just like that. And then if I want to do reverse, I'm just going to say negative speed in front of it. So we'll say else, if we're going the opposite direction, make sure the belt move belts backwards. Belt dot speed equals negative speed, and that'll turn to the opposite direction. So that's only if we do is forward. So we need a way to set is forward to control the belt moving. So I'm going to make a public method down here, public void, because it's not going to return anything, and we're going to call this change direction. Open close. In change direction, we're going to say I'm going to do a kind of a slick way of doing this, and I'll explain what I'm doing. So if I go is forward equals true, then it's true. If it's false, then it's false. But the value of is forward is either true or false. And if I set is forward equal to negative, or not negative, but not is forward, what that does is sets it to the opposite value. So if is forward is true, it sets it to false. If is forward is false, it sets it to true. And it's just a very easy way for you to do switching a bool back and forth to become whatever it's not. Otherwise, you would have to say is forward true, then set it to false. Else, if it is false, then set it to true. This will just handle it all in one little thing. So set is forward to the opposite value. Okay, so I made this public because I'm going to have something else run this change direction, which is going to be the button that we're actually running. This console just handles the belt. The belt moves in a direction because of the speed. So let's make our thing that we're going to interact with. One of the things that are in the project is the Scraps interactive tool script thing. And so in scripts, we've got Scraps interactive. Interactive allows you to use a Unity event to control something. And so I'm just going to use the interactive script to cause this button to be usable to move something. So let's select the button. And then on this button, let's go, actually I'm going to I'm going to right click on button and create an empty underneath it. Or let's see, do I want to do under? Let's go, I'm going to move it up to the top actually. Game object. This game object is going to hold the button. So I'm going to put button under this. Game object is going to be interactive button. Interactive button, I want to make sure that this object, because it's going to be I'm going to do a sphere collider. The sphere collider is going to be a trigger. And then I'm going to change the radius to be big enough to stand in. So I can walk up into this spot. I can make it a little bit smaller so we're not like next to the console and interacting with it. But if I make it just big enough so the player can stand in this sphere, then I can do something with it. I'm going to add that script to it, so Scraps Interactive, and then this has an event, says on interact, and if I add something to this list, it'll call that thing. So I'm going to change layer to ignore raycast so we can walk into it. We have an object that is a child of this at the moment. We don't want the child to be ignore raycast. So I'm going to say no, this object only, and then I'm going to add a event. So this event comes in, there's no object here, but if I assign any object to this, we can call things from it. So if I were to put this button in here, you would see that no function shows up, and now I could do like set active false, or I could turn off the mesh filter, or I could do transform, set parent. So all those things become available when you drag it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the console into here, which has our script on it. Then console, if you go in here, you see conveyor console shows up. And then we have the functions that exist in it, including our change direction. So I'm going to click on that. And the interactive script will prompt the player to press E. And when they press E, they're going to control the direction. So we're already on forward. So even though I have this conveyor belt, the trigger is set to -2. When I hit play, it's actually going to go forward again because conveyors are going forward. So hit play. And now if I run up to it, jump on it, it's going to go, yeah, it's going back this way instead of, that actually is incorrect. I'm going to see if I can change it. Oh, null reference. That's what I'm looking for. So we forgot to assign the conveyor belt. That's why it's not actually showing up. And so these start spamming in here. If you go to one of these and select it, it highlights the object that doesn't have a value. Go to the console and you see that we didn't assign the conveyor belt. So let's drag conveyor belt into that slot. Actually, it's trigger volume. Trigger volume's got that script on it, so we want to make sure the trigger volume is dragged into that. So if you drag this in here, you can just populate it, or if you're not sure which one it is, you can click on the circle, find it, and then just assign it. So now it's actually referencing that belt. If I hit play, it's going to actually go in the opposite direction now because we're changing it in update. Try this one more time, jump in. Yep, now we're moving that way. So if I go to the button, press E, we don't have any sort of feedback, but if I jump on it now, oops, still going the other way. Try again. There we go, now it's going the other way. So my pressing E just didn't activate it yet. But now we can switch this direction one more time. There we go. So that's all well and good that it's working for the player, and it's only one conveyor belt, but what if I wanted multiple belts that move this thing around? So I'm going to take this belt here that we have, and we're going to go ahead and duplicate it. And then I'm going to rotate it like this. And in order to get these belts to move the object in the direction we want, this trigger here is going to move it to the end there, and then this one is going to move it to here. But if we wanted these to work together, we need to make sure that the endpoint is both on the same side first of all. So this one I need to rotate. So let's get conveyor belt. I need this to go the opposite direction. Make sure all of the endpoints are in the same direction. And then once I have that here, the endpoint, we're moving to the endpoint here, but that's only while we're in the trigger volume. So if I wanted to, you could be kind of gross and embed this, but that's going to cause some Z fighting, which you don't want anything that looks like that. So the better thing would be to change the object. So if I select the, let's go this Pro Builder object, select the faces, select the face, move it over to the edge. When you're moving faces, you can hold V to snap. And so I snapped it right to the edge, and then that's going to move objects onto that conveyor. Visually, it looks like it's going to go there, but we need to make sure the trigger volume also continues over. So I'm going to make this box collider. Let's edit. And now when you hit edit collider, you can see this little button things show up, you can drag this over. I'm going to go like halfway into this so that they both work with each other. And so we've got that trigger going to there. And then what is the invisible cube I got? Real quick. Oh, that's just what it was before, I guess. I was wondering why I saw that trigger goes that way. Yes. Okay. That might be ProBuilder trying to draw the collider, but I've moved it further. Or it's the mesh renderer. Yeah, it's the mesh renderer. So that's why it looks like there's something there, but the trigger actually continues all the way down. Okay, so the way that we have it set up is I should be able to have something come down this, and then it's going to start moving this direction and essentially turn. If I move it the opposite direction, this is going to move this way, and then it should catch it and start moving it that way. So let's see if we can do that with some boxes. And then we'll have to tell the console to check for multiple belts. So let's add a shape, new shape, cube, hold V, snap it over here. I'm going to change the size of this to be 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5, and build it. And now we have something that's small enough that it's not going to be obtrusive to pick it up and put it on there and stuff with the grabnel. I'm going to set the pivot to center, and then we'll make this object able to be lifted by the grabnel. I'm going to remove the mesh collider. I'm going to add a box collider because you should always, if it's going to be a cube, you should use a box collider. There's no need to use meshes. Meshes are actually more expensive for collision and whatnot. So I have a box collider. I'm going to drag out the grabnel object script and put it on here, which automatically applies the rigid body. And then the only other thing I need to do is make sure that this is dynamic. So let's go to Material Editor. We'll go to Dynamic. There we go. And then I'm just going to duplicate it. Another one here. And duplicate another one there. And then I'm going to hit play. And we should be able to at least have them move. It's not going to change the direction. Let's make sure my direction is right. So that's going that way right now. And then this one's going which direction? The other way. So let's flip it real quick. Click. There we go. And here we go. So if I move, so it moves me to the end, I might have to cross them over a little bit. If I was right here, it would catch me. So we may have to tweak that a bit, but I can then pick up a box, set it on it, and see if I can get it to ride through there. If you're moving rigid bodies and you want them not to flop around like that, you can change some stuff with it. That's not quite moving with it. We may need to cross both of those triggers over each other. So let's grab this conveyor belt. I'm going to edit this collider again and edit, drag it over so that it's right on top of that, and that should fix it. So let's go ahead and make sure these belts are moving the same direction. So on the conveyor belt, the conveyor console rather, right now we're using one belt. So I can make a second belt by doing comma belt 2, or instead of doing only 2 belts, we should use an array to use as many belts as we assign. So if I want to do an array of belts, I would go to the end of the script and just go open, close, square bracket. Let's call it belts. Now, if I have more than one belt, I'm going to have to use a loop to, like a for loop or a for each, something like that, to set all of them to the correct value. So what I'm going to do is just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say for each, and in for each, it's going to need the type of thing we're using, which is a conveyor belt. Now the first part of a for each loop is going to be a single, like a single object. So I'm just going to call this belt, and then we're going to say in, and the in is going to be the thing that we are. So this is going to be for each individual belt inside of belts, the array. So for each single inside of the group belts, we're going to do a thing. Okay, so since we have belt as the variable here, I can just take this and put it in here. And now that's going to run it for any of them that I put into that array. Same thing for down here. Let's go ahead and copy this, enter, paste, and then close that down. All right, so for each belt inside of the belts array, we're going to make sure that it changes the speed. Okay. So let's go ahead and assign our second belt and actually our first one to this same array. It's going to compile right quick. Okay, so now belts, if I pop this open and set this to 2, we have 2 belts that we can assign, or if we change the number to as many as we want, we can have as many as we want. Conveyor belt, actually it's trigger, so open this up, trigger volume, and then this one, trigger volume, hold on, console, trigger volume, there you go. So we've got 2 of them, and we can now, or we should be able to now change the direction of both. To make sure that these boxes don't flop around when I carry them, I'm just going to select all 3 of them, holding control, and then I'm going to lock the rotation. So freeze rotation, 1, 2, 3, so that they just stay in the position that they're at, just to make this a little easier. And let's give this a shot. Okay, so if I jump on this now, we're going to go this direction, and that should be for both of them now. Yes, so this one's going to go this way, and it's going to start carrying me this way, maybe. There we go. I may have to tweak that a little bit more, but if I change the direction, then we should be able to now get on this one. Get on here. What's happening? There we go. So yeah, I'm still gonna have to figure out a different method for some of that. I might have to create like a third middle one to cross over, but it's the basic ideas there. Or I can create some sort of walls or boundaries for it. You can try that. Let's do a basic, like a wall of some sort to keep things from falling off of the side of this. So let's go with this object doesn't have like a hole in it or something, so we're gonna have to create a wall. So I'm gonna go new shape, move it up, snap it over here, and then we'll build it, close this, and we're just gonna create an edge. So move it over. I can hold V to snap to the belt, grab the top, move it down, then it'll be just high enough to where I can put something on the belt, but it shouldn't be able to push over the top of it. If we go all the way down this way, okay. Actually, I'm going to move it over a little bit, like here. Let's go actually snap it to this side. So while you're moving it, hold V, snap it to this thing instead, then shift to extrude, and then hold V to snap, and then grab this side, shift to extrude, and then let's finish it off over here. That way we have all the one piece. And while we're moving it, hold V, snap it to the end. And I'm just going to see if that'll help with the sliding off of things. So play. I'll have to put another one on it when I change the direction. There's our wall for it now. Pick it up, put it on there. Oh, going the wrong way. Change direction. Pick it up, put it on here. Oh, and I need to put in some sort of feedback to know what direction I'm going. One more time. There you go. So it's going to go that way. I need to make sure it's here on the corner. There you go. Corner all the way down, and then let's see if it goes up, 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 up. Oh, it wants to go up. And it's just because of where that point is. Something I'm gonna have to tweak and change. If I move this back a bit, like here before the edge, maybe. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's moving away from it. How do I want to do it different? I mean, I guess that's fine. It needs to be moving away from that point. So if I put it over here, like away from it, maybe. I don't know if that's going to change it or not. Yeah, I may just have to put a middle point, or a middle like curved point in there. Keep forgetting it's going the wrong direction. Enter. Make sure it's going the right way. Get in here. That way. Yes. Okay. Pick it up. Put it on. Travel down. And then it should go away from that one. There you go. Better. That's a lot better. It's still going to slide off, so I got to put a wall up. But that worked. So excellent. So let's make one more wall. I will go new shape. Here's the cube. Let's snap it. Move it to the end here. So snap it to this one. Oop, too high. Snap corner. Move it over, and then I'll just actually I should snap this side, then build it, then get rid of this window. Select the edge, move it over, hold V to snap it to the belt. There we go. Grab the top, move it down, hold V to snap to the top, then grab this and move it down. All right. And then we'll snap edge, hold shift, snap edge, grab this one, hold shift, and move it to the end. And then we can snap it here. So there. So now I've got my two rails. I'm going to select these two rails. Actually, we're moving edges, so I'm going to have to reset them. So select it, edge, click off of it, object, click it. Let's go to materials, material editor, and let's do static warm. We'll make it a different color maybe. And then we'll do this one. Click off of it, click on it, and warm. Is warm what I want? I don't even know. That's, yeah, so it's a different color than the bottom. I mean, that's fine. All right, so now we've got a belt that when we actually do get on it, is going to have, it's going to be able to shift that direction, kind of like the image that we were looking at was going to do. So if I change the direction, put it on it, come on, get on there. That's what I wanted to make sure that this didn't move when I didn't set it directly on top of it. So there you go. So it's going to travel down, and then it's going to turn. It's going to try to ride up on it. And you can change things with speed and whatnot, but it should go that way. Still going to be something I'm going to have to tweak the volumes with, because yeah, that doesn't even go up the side. It just hangs out. But let's see, what was the last thing I wanted to do? So I want to be able to, when I move something to the end, to have it reset back without the player knowing that it's going to. I'm going to change this trigger volume to run off just slightly so it actually does fall. And let's do, that one's there, this one over here, conveyor belt, trigger. Let's make sure this one rolls off just slightly. Edit. Oh, and it's because it's not rotating, that's why. It's just hanging on the edge. That one's going to go that way, that one's going to go that way. It's like I could move it so that instead of it being embedded into the wall here, it was a little smaller. So we can take the size on the X, and let's just move that. If you put your mouse over it, you can drag both at the same time to kind of fit that in there. And then this one over here, let's change it, trigger volume, and shrink it down, fit it in there. Okay. So yeah, the last thing I want to do is make it so that if I send it in a direction, it goes into like a little box, and then it's going to reset to the other one. So I'm going to have to create some sort of container for those. I just want to try this one more time. Get in here. All right, it's going to head on down, then it's going to turn. Oop, yeah, that's better. So if it's rotating, which I stopped it from rotating so it wouldn't flip around while I was carrying it, but if these were rotating, that would probably react a little bit better. So I'm going to select those again one more time. I'm not going to go ahead and do it. I just want to make sure it's ready for the next time. So at this side and this side of the conveyor belt, I'm going to have them send the objects to the opposite one based on what the console is set at. So I'm going to add a new, let's actually, instead of building the location of where this is going to happen, I'm going to make a trigger real quick. So here, new shape, snap it. This is going to be the trigger for this side, and if it, let's go build it, close it. Make sure this is sized properly. So select the edge, hold V, move it, hold V, and just get it so it's just kind of right here at the edge. Actually, let's go here, I guess. So this is going to be a trigger volume that's going to capture stuff that if it's going this way and it hits it, it's going to warp to the other side, and vice versa. So I'm going to leave that here. We're going to say remove this mesh collider, add a box collider, trigger, and then this will be warp objects, I guess. And actually, I don't want this to be super tall because I don't want the player to be moved. I want this to only be objects that, like rigid bodies and stuff, should move from one to the other. So let's make this small enough so that if the player tries to go into it, I'm going to have like a container around or thing over it that'll stop it from going in there. So this will be a warp objects trigger. We're going to set the layer to ignore raycast, turn off the mesh renderer, and then we're going to add a script to it. But this script is going to, we're going to need to move it to the center of this object. So let's make center pivot. So the pivot is right there in the middle. And because I did that, it moved the box collider. So let's reset the box collider. Reset. Now it's right where this thing is, which is great. Just to show, there's the edges. So let's make a script. Add DAM warp trigger, I guess. It's fine. Script, warp trigger, create an add. Yes, whenever that comes up. And then let's move this to the opposite side. Not even going to finish building it just yet. I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this, move it to the other side. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, I think I said it earlier, but you should never destroy and instantiate constantly because you're just wasting memory at that point. So instead, I'm going to just recycle these objects as they come through. So move this to the end, make this just big enough. You can do mesh renderer. Select it like this, move it over, select it like this, move it over. And then if it goes into that box, then it'll warp to the other one. Turn the mesh renderer off. Oop. Now we've got two triggers that will do that thing. So the warp trigger just needs to know if something is entered and where the other one is. So let's go in here, and I'm going to tie these together to each other. So that means it needs a variable for the other one. So we're going to say public DAM warp trigger other side. Okay, and then if we have other side set and something enters it, so let's go void on trigger enter. And actually enter and exit is going to be, or where it goes will be based on if we're going forward or backward. So if we're going forward, actually, yeah, I guess what I'm going to have to do is on trigger enter only if it's going forward or backward. So let's do DAM conveyor console. I'm going to go ahead and store that. So public, actually, let's do, instead of setting it there, let's go ahead and make a, let's go public bool does warp equals true. Or let's go set it to false first. Okay, so if it does warp, then if something enters the trigger, and then we can go if other dot get component rigid body, does not equal null, so it has a rigid body. And then we can say, cool, if does warp is true, then we should send it to the other one. So we're going to go other dot transform dot position is going to equal other side dot transform dot position. And if we move it, because it's a rigid body, we're going to have to stop its velocity. Otherwise, it's going to just kind of rocket off into space. So we're going to say other dot get component rigid body, and then dot velocity, because once we get component rigid body, we're at rigid body. Then dot velocity, and set this equal to vector3 dot 0. So nothing on it. So if you put the mouse over it, it says shorthand for writing vector3 0 0 0, nulls out all of that, sets its position to here, and then we should be in the other volume and start moving. That's only when it enters the thing. So I'm going to have the warps change based on the console, so we can make sure that they go in the right direction. And then I believe that was all we need to do. Let's make sure the button actually gives me feedback that we're changing the direction. So on the console, I'm gonna have to store the warp trigger. So let's go ahead and make another variable, public DM warp trigger, and I'm just gonna have 2 for this one. So we're gonna say start or forward finish, and we'll have public DM warp trigger backward finish. So the 2 sides, just so I know which one's which. And yeah, when I press the button, so whenever I change direction, I want this to actually display a message in the chat box. And so on the game design document, it'll talk about the message system. I'm not going to pull it up right now because I want to make sure we can finish recording this video. But the message system can be accessed by just typing scraps underscore message system. Once you do that, you can hit period and instance, which will be the one instance of that message system. And then the next thing you run is a method called new message. New message, when you open it, contains a from for who said it, a body for what did they say, and whatever type of message type it is. Like I said, you need to, if you're unaware of what these things are, go to the game design document, load up the message system page, and read what each one of these things does. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and use it. Who's doing this is we're interacting with a button. I don't really need a name for this. I'll just say console. And then the next one we're going to say Conveyor. Let's see. I'm going to have to change the message based on if it's forward or backward. So let's go ahead and make a if is forward is true. And then we'll do else for the other one, and then we'll have 2 messages. Boom. All right. Take this, cut, paste. And then let's finish this out. So if we're going forward, this is going to say console direction, or console is going to say direction, or forward direction. That's fine. And then comma, scraps message type. The type I'm going to use is just going to be a standard message. And then I'm going to copy this whole thing. By the way, if this is too long and it runs off the thing, runs off the side and you want to see the rest, this line doesn't end until you put a semicolon on it. So if you wanted to say new message and then hit enter and say the first thing is console, and the next thing is forward direction, and then the next thing is the type of message, that's the same thing. It doesn't end until you get to the semicolon. So let's copy this. I'm going to paste it here. We're going to say console says it. We're going to say reverse direction. And then, yeah, standard message. And that'll tell me what direction we actually set it to. When we change the direction, I want to make sure that the triggers that we are warping to need to be set to the right one. So make sure the belts move forward, set forward end warp. So forward finish dot does warp is our boolean, set it to true, and backward finish does warp equals false. And then we want the opposite for the other one. Copy, paste. Set reverse and warp. I should have just said reverse so it was the same. False, true, and now it'll swap which one sends it from one to the other. So warp trigger knows that if it does warp and something enters the volume and it is a rigid body, to send the position to the other side. So if that logic all works out, we should have objects enter the one side and then appear on the other and just keep moving. Oh, bless you. Okay, so warp trigger has a slot for the other warp. Let's go ahead and drag this other one into it. And then let's go to the other one and make sure it assigns this one. So now they both point to each other. And then this console is going to need it. So let's go to the console and have it talk to the two warp triggers. So trigger one, actually, let's make sure one is forward. This is going to be, can't remember what the forward direction was real quick. Let's hit play. And this should be forward now. So there's going to be like an error, but this is currently forward. So forward was this way. So this is forward finish. And if I press E, it says reverse direction. This is reverse direction. So forward finish is going to be this one. It's warp. We'll call this forward warp. And then the other one's going to be reverse warp. Reverse warp. Okay, so that way we know which one we're talking to. And let's do the console. We need forward finish, forward warp, backward finish, reverse warp, and then we'll just make sure everything else looks correct. So yeah, forward goes to reverse and reverse goes to forward. That should all be ready to go. Let's see if this actually does what I'm hoping it'll do. So play. We're currently going forward. So if this was a repetitive conveyor belt, you should be able to put something on it and send it to the other side. And then it's going to come back down, just like that, come back over, and send it right back to the other side. Cool. And if I reverse it, send it back. And there you have it. I don't have to repeatedly delete and add these objects. They just keep moving on that conveyor belt all the way down. It's fighting to try to get off. But so let's hide the place that is warping, and let's add a bunch of objects to it, and then we'll go ahead and call it quits. So new shape. Let's build a container here, some sort of something that closes the space in. So build it, select it, move it over, snap the corner. This is going to be a box over the top of it. So let's go with, I'm just going to back it up to here and move it down like here-ish. So that'll be the back of that wall. And then let's do is this what I want to do? Let's find out. I would rather make this a different way, I think. Let's go ahead and do the wall first, build it. I know that we just created walls, but I didn't leave an edge here. I'm just going to make the cap its own thing. So this is going to come down like this. I'm going to hold shift and go up a little bit, create the roof, hold shift, move it over, snap it, hold shift. Okay, and then grab the bottom here. That was much easier. Shift and down. There we go. So that's there, and then we can put something on that side to cap it off. Let's go ahead and edge, select, click on it again so we can actually put the material on it. Let's go to materials, material editor, and static. Let's do static warm, because that's what we did for the top. Yeah. static warm, and then let's close that back off. So new shape right here, snap it to the corner, build it, close the window, select it, move it over, and then close this back. Okay, move it down, snap it, there you go. Now we don't have Z fighting. I have a little bit down here because it's on the edge. I'm just peeking in, grabbing the different faces. I don't even know if I can get that one without moving it out. Let's go ahead and just move it out a little bit. Select this, move it up, snap it to the top, and move it back. Something like that. Okay, so there's the container, and then we'll go ahead and do face, select out here, come back to it, material editor, and warm, there you go. And then if we duplicate this, move it to the other side. So let's make this its own object. So I'm gonna go empty object, so we don't have to like rebuild it. This is gonna be the housing, I guess. And then cube under housing, take this housing and duplicate it, move it down here, and now we can rotate it. Holding control to rotate, so it snaps, move it down. Cool, there's the end of that one, the end of that one, and now it looks more like a functioning conveyor belt of sort. We probably don't need this to go this far anymore. We can bring this in, but I'm not gonna worry about that for right now. So there's our belt that moves objects. Let's go ahead and just put these cubes up on here now, and then let's duplicate some and just get this whole system rolling. So 1, 2, 3, and then we'll take let's take this one, move it a little bit, duplicate it here, duplicate another one, and then that's going to be my set of objects, I think. Let's move one down here just to offset it a little bit, maybe. Okay, so if I hit play, then we're going to see this belt kind of start doing a thing. Cool, so here we go, belt. And just like that, you've got a whole working conveyor belt system. And if the player gets on it, we can see if we can, I don't know if I even made it player size. Can we make it? Do you think we can warp? Yeah. So definitely don't do that. The player's not supposed to teleport in scraps. So just to be on the safe side, make sure that the player isn't actually warping from location to location, or you could incur a penalty. So I'm going to go ahead and close those up a bit so that you can't actually fit in it. That would be bad. I'm going to duplicate this cube, move it to the front. Let's select this, make this a little smaller, but just enough so that the player can't actually fit in here. Snapping it up. Not on the front. Come on. There we go. So that's not going to let anything in it. There we go. Up a little bit higher, just like that. Just enough to stop them from getting in there. Let's make sure that actually lets things in. Yeah, those are going to go in there. Let's see if I can still fit. No. Okay. And then if I stand here, all the boxes, oh, still made it. And so you'll have to tweak the size of the boxes, tweak the size of the actual conveyor belt and whatnot to make sure that you're not warping things. Or actually, we can just remove this and then make sure that the player doesn't travel. So on the warp script, I'm going to pop that one open real quick. That'll be a good thing to show. Right here, I'm just checking for rigid bodies. Let's also make sure we'll go and oop, not and, here we go. And other.tag does not equal player. And that way, if it is the player, they're not going to warp through that. I'm just going to put a comment here. Do not have the player teleport. And a little wink, just so you know. All right. and then play, just to test one more time. Up here, travel it down. Okay, so I can't go in there now, but I can definitely block all of the stuff. It's going a little too fast, so now I'm stuck. Another fun thing here. So we're going to have to make sure that the player can't even go into that at all, or that it stops at some point so that the player can get out. And that could be speed. You could have it to where I probably go once again to making sure this wall doesn't let the player in, because we were pretty close. So let's just duplicate this again. And then I'll be done. Snap. Actually, don't snap yet. Let's make this smaller. If I put this next to the boxes, I would actually have something of scale to compare it to. So let's grab a box. If this box was coming down this way, a little off center. Okay, if this box was coming down this way, it would be this high. This high means this would be here. And then we can go select the bottom of it here and just move it just above the box so it can go in. And that'll be that. I'm surprised these are a little offset. I didn't even notice. 1, 2, 3. Move it over. There you go. And then these ones as well. No, that looks okay. Okay. So now that little housing has this, and that thing will stop stuff from going in there. So instead of having to rebuild this over here, these are the same object, just rotated. So I'm going to actually duplicate this cube. We're going to go to the other housing and just paste it, or not paste it, but place it under here. And then notice that it has a 90 degrees, and this one doesn't. You can actually just copy this transform now, because this is a child of housing. So if this other one is also a child, but it's of this one, this transform is local. So you can just go to the gear and say paste values, and automatically it's over here in that space. And then you're good. So play. Okay. Box is still moving. They can fit. I can change the rotation. There you go. Then if I get on it, make one more time, make sure. If I travel down, do I get stuck? No. So now I'm not going to get stuck on it, and I can try to run in the opposite direction. But there you have it. So we've got a working conveyor belt that we can, change all the directions. You can change the speed if you want to. You can have it go up or down. All up to you guys, but at least now it makes it look like a functioning factory or something like that. But it also can be gameplay. Like these boxes could be something I have to stand on to then reach something that's higher. So you'd have to like place a box on it, wait for it to come up, and then jump on that one to get to the top or something. But anyways, that's going to be it for the live session. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And then those who are here, if you would like to ask a question or two before I close it down, feel free to. And thanks for joining me.